Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where you live around the world. We're back again in short order, for me at least, for the next step in considering which approach to take. Do we alter where we generate a intersection point for the leg, as I've done here, compared to this version, via, I'll just see whether I can unhide things. I chose the lower position for where the dome penetrates the flush and plane sections. This was the higher position, this is the lower position, and straight away you can see that yes, we've shortened the leg, but see how the proportions of the surfaces start to look quite different. These, you could say that these three, this one, and this one, are kind of proportionate, but look how this one has become so slender, more like the leg version, and this you do see in some of the photos. It's unnecessary that you will, because of this shortened version, shortened line here in this version, but the surfaces become a little bit less pleasing. This, at least, while yes it is more squished in this direction compared to this version, this one is elongated at the cost of the proportions of the surfaces. This at least is, while asymmetric, it is balanced. This is not really balanced in either direction, so is less aesthetically pleasing. It needn't be any less strong or legitimate. It just has this alternative method of achieving it that may not be what we want. We go to the plan view. Now I've coloured them so that they relate to each other. Anything in green is the conventional, anything in the mustardy colour is the method 2 or the alternate version. And with this version, with the shortened leg, we get this curvature which I've been banging on about as being perhaps the more desirable. That is a subjective position to take, but by knowing how it is achieved and determining that there is no greater benefit for it, we can then either relegate it to a also ran and not the one we want to go with, or we can soften the amount of change on the strut. At this stage, we're only affecting the strut, not the length. I'll say that we altered the position of intersection, and that lengthened this measurement. But the other method, which we're going to do next, and it'll still be on this alternate method, is raising the base of the dome, and I'll touch on that very quickly, and then I will pause it and show you the example, so that if anyone wants to replicate it, they know what we're doing, but you don't have to suffer through the wait period of me doing it. Okay, so, but this, I've got to say, looking at it in a, and this is another point, I'll pause myself partway through that thought. You've got to sometimes bring yourself down to where you'd be seeing it perhaps in a, like a real situation. You don't have the bird's eye view that this affords you, to look at this. Mind you, that said, you'll be inside the dome looking upward, and that may well represent or replicate this sort of view, and hence why we are considering it. Okay, I will quickly pause this and come back to you with the next iteration, and then we'll step through, or the base upon which we'll use to generate the next part of this video. And we're back again, and I reiterate the benefit of having a standard approach to drawing or making the iterations and therefore the development, because not only is it logical, it's so much easier. Again, I was able to pull this surface in from down here simply by moving, copying it 15 meters. It lands exactly in the right place, and you don't have to fudge it to nudge it around and then possibly build in errors between the different parts of the dome. What we're going to do now is generate the base. Now I could generate it for ease of doing so. I could generate it from the side and simply, in fact I'll do that, rather than trying to strike the lines with all the other interfering parts. I can simply click on these points, making sure they are the correct points on the side, because the sides, hang on, let me make sure I've double clicked that, the sides are the same and the base is the same as the sides. So I'll flick that through the green axis down 90 degrees. Now we've got our base. For no other reason than I want to, I'm going to colour that a different colour. What colour will I make it? Oh. Where did it go? Okay. It's a standout colour. Can't be mistaken for any other surface. Now what we can do, as I've said, the longer line in the background here is the preferred version to keep these balanced, these surfaces balanced. So I'm going to have to use that same point that keeps this upper part balanced. What I can then do is choose to lift this base by, and that's the question, by how much, but by a certain amount. I was choosing to lift it up, say, a proportion of the length of this section. If you took a line, you could say, well, if we lift it up this much to the midpoint, it would shorten the leg by quite a significant amount. And that significant amount may be too much, but that's where we're going to lift it up to initially. You may decide, and I'll just draw a line in between those 2 points, you may decide to lift it up quarter the length, and that's a decision you'll have to make. So the decision is halfway or quarter way up this length. As I said, this is subjective. So in fact I'm just going to lift it up to the quarter mark. So the easiest way is just to, as I've already got there, select, go to move, hit the up button or arrow and lift it up to this point. This means that the point on this coloured surface here is the same point as down here. What it does do, however, as I touched on before, it starts to rotate the leg outwards, reducing the dihedral angle, getting a bit tied up, between the surfaces, flattening that difference. Not always desirable. We could conceivably generate a line from the center of the dome out and make the intersection point here. That would maintain that dihedral angle, and it may be one of those decisions that can be made at some point, just not yet. Okay, so I will generate this new leg. These 4 surfaces remain the same, but these ones will change. Well, in fact, these may actually all stay the same, and it's only the leg that changes. Okay, so I'll draw that up and I will be back very soon, and then we can compare. And back once again with this shortened length of the leg. We've retained the balanced look of the hexagon area, not this version but this one. We've gone back to this point, we've just created a shortened leg, but we've retained the strut length as we did here, which was in this scenario the more balanced, even though it's not as much, not as well balanced as the green version, but we've gone back to this particular version. This one we shortened the line here and kept this point on the leg, whereas this one we've gone back that 2 stages, but we've lifted the point at which the leg is generated, as I'm indicating here. This is the thing, I'm going through the increments or the iterations for you so that you don't have to, but I'd like to think that you could do these in short order yourself once you've got the drawing method. So now again we'll compare them, and the ziggy-zaggy wobbly line there moved to a nice smooth arcing line there. We're back to a bit of a ziggy-zaggy line across here, and that's simply because that we retained the length of this line here. In fact, that line making up, or that line that's of the 4 struts or lines there should be in theory identical to this, because nothing on the upper part has changed, it's only the lower. So on this we don't gain a lot of insight, but when we come to the front view, yes, I've got that off, I'll just hide these and this one perhaps, we can start to see the impact that is having. The leggy nature of these ones is starting to be reduced because of the lower distance between this line and this line, the elevation. I could drop this down at the moment, I could, but I'll just leave it here just now. But this distance, I will just have a look, is about, it's only about 100 millimeters, 96 millimeters. But remembering, for every times we increase this by a factor of 100%, so if we went from a 1 meter dome to a 6 meter dome, well, this is actually 2 meters at the moment, but so it'll be 300 mils difference, and that's enough to be important to consider. You're starting also to approach this sweepy nature of the opening that we see in many of the nice photos of the domes. The proportion, actually I'll get rid of the parallel projection. The proportion here, as I said, has reverted back to this version, and the leg itself is starting to become a little bit more proportionate to the triangle that it will surface that it abuts, that it joins. So this version is superior to this version, where we want to keep this line long, and we've got a squatter dome as a consequence. If we lift it up any more than the quarter length of this particular line, so if we moved it up to halfway, you start to run that chance of, as I was saying, flattening the dihedral angle so much that it becomes flat. And the easiest way to show that at this stage is to run a guide from that point up through the center point and see how much distance there is off of the other part of the dome. The easier way is to draw it from this point to this point and see what the distance is off of this leg. So that's the other way of doing it. In fact, I could do that quickly now. Oops, don't want that. Cancel that. Get rid of the guides. Got a bit of a croaky voice this morning, so apologise for that. But you can see that this distance is roughly, well, it's saying 40 mil. Well, actually, it's about 40 millimeters. Doesn't sound a lot, and it's not, because if we were to lift this up to the halfway point and create the same guideline, the distance is 20 mil. It's halved. It's still acceptable, but when you draw your guide up from here to here, oops, I'll do that again, getting ahead of myself. This distance here reduces quite a bit, and it's, as I said, starting to get flatter and flatter. So halfway, is that acceptable? Yes, it is. It will certainly lower the height of this dome, and that comes back to the question of what is a good height. Now, I've said anywhere between 1.6 to 2 meters, so a good point would be, or maybe 1.4 to 2 meters, but I think a good height is 1.8 meters to this point here. And that is considering, that is solely dependent upon how big you make the dome. And that's what we're going to touch on very quickly now, because as I draw it, the distance between these points, we've got this odd measurement, but we know that 1414 is the diagonal measurement of a 1 meter by 1 meter square. So if I just come across the points of the dome, the legs, I know that's 2 meters. And we won't go down that route, but we know that the relationship of the 1414 is to 1 meter. Okay, so I'll pause this again because I don't want this video going too long, as it is all starting to do already, and I'll be straight back. Righty-ho, we're back. All I've done was scale this up to approximately 6 meters. That means that I'll actually just pop a base in. Make a group. The height from this point down to the base is 1949. So we know that this style of dome is in the range that we want. I would prefer this measurement to be a little bit lower. Can I adjust the leg? Yes, I can. But if I do so in this method of drawing the dome rather than the conventional method as we see in the green, so if I start to alter this, it changes the proportion here, and if I decide to change the length of the leg, excuse me, from the base, it makes the dihedral angle not as nice. So we've got a choice. Where do we make this adjustment? If we go up to 7 meters, the range that I'm looking at is 6 to 8 meters, but if we went up to 7 meters, which I'll do right now while we're doing it, or close to, the distance here is acceptable, but starting to get up in height. The only reason I'm saying that this wants to be around about 2 meters at the upper end is that any higher and things are getting leggy. The length of the struts become very much longer. Well, they do, but there's no advantage for headspace. So at 1800 to 2 meters, the average person can approach this area and out to the sides so that the maximum usable area underneath is obtained. The reason I lean towards having a lower height is that sometimes I've been saying that these points don't have to touch the ground. They can be elevated. So you can achieve that through whatever hold down method that you're going to choose, but you could choose to have anchor piles which come out of the ground, keeping the structure off of the ground a certain amount, or use part of your landscaping, which is for me rather large planters, and they become part of the overall look and theme of the landscaping that this is part of. The other thing is having a high pitch above your head height. If it's just for bodies, human occupation or use, it's not a lot of an advantage, and it becomes waste, and we don't want that. So that was where we're at this stage. If we make a fourth, this is number 3 in the series of videos, if we make a fourth one, it will be because we have determined something is worthy of consideration. But otherwise we've stepped through the 2 methods of creating the base dome, then the truncated version of each, the altered leg, and in these 2 iterations. And we've come to the conclusion that lifting the base is better than the altering this intersection point. We want to keep this as long as possible. Now we could, I suppose, create the next video with the different methods of truncating the leg on the conventional method of drawing, and that may well be a consideration that I have a look externally to this video for the different domes that we're doing so far, and if there's an advantage there will be another video. If not, this will be the end of the condensed versions of drawing the 2 domes. Okay, we'll see you later. Bye.